Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the North American ESL Go4GuildWars2 monthly for the February season. My name is Blue.
And I'm Rue. Rhymes a little bit, doesn't it? I'm glad you guys have been putting up with me today. It's been a fun experience. We are getting to that very end where we're going to see the Abjured and Genesis fight for $1,000. Now, second place takes $300. That's still pretty nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and we're going to see... I think this is great for Genesis. If they can come back, start looking good. I thought they looked very impressive. What do you think as far as their ability to stack up against the Abjured? What are their options going to be for beating what you know to be Abjured in the series?
Well, it's actually going to be quite interesting because we talked a little bit about this before we got started with the last set, that Abjured's new composition, which it does look like they are going to be playing today, is it's pretty similar to the comp they just played. Now, the Abjured's is a little bit more safely. They don't run with 4 Zerkers, they only run with 3 Zerkers. There is going to be a little bit more sustainability that the players over here on Genesis will have to work through, but I mean, overall, they've already got a bit of a warm-up because the issue they had last Sunday was that they were working against a large amount of just pressure overall, which they faced in the last set. So they've already had time to warm up against that and kind of get used to that scenario, and it's only going to continue here. So I think Genesis is actually on a pretty good vibe right now, as now they already know, at least today, they've already been warmed up of how to fight against such an aggressive comp, and I think that overall they could have a pretty strong chance against the Abjured here.
Yeah, because everyone should know out there that the Abjured are the favorites generally to do very well, especially in America. Yeah. International audiences, maybe everyone's cashed a little bit of doubt now, but Genesis is a team that could maybe come and meet them. I know we talked about it earlier being, you know, maybe one of those things where if they take one off of them, it's a big accomplishment. Do you think it's still a really big accomplishment with the kind of dynamic we're going to see just to get that one?
Yeah, I would have to say so. I'd say, I mean, again, like, Abjured is still very much the front runner here. I wouldn't necessarily say that, you know, it's going to be an easy matchup at all here for Genesis. If, like, Abjured is still very much, probably my prediction for this one is going to be that Abjured takes a 2-0. But I think Genesis, you know, if anything, Genesis after that last match, they're looking pretty good because there is a bit of similarity in regards to the comps that they're playing here.
And so the main similarities, do you think they'll cancel out, or it'll be about some of that individual player skill that we're seeing?
I think a lot of it is going to come down to the player skill, essentially, there. And it also has to do a lot with the fact that the guys on Genesis haven't necessarily been together for the longest time, whereas the Abjured, like I said, they are currently the longest standing roster in North America. They've been together since early November, so they are, you know, very much so a team that's been together for a while, and they have a lot of working with each other that is under their belt as well.
Now, here's something that happens, I know, all over the place. When you're up against someone who you know is more experienced than you, knows the meta better, you know, leads the way, you countered that out, right?
Yeah.
You make hard counters. You really work to try and just beat that out. Is Genesis going to have any of those options coming up in this match?
As we head into the game to check things out, actually, on that remark, it's going to be a bit interesting to see how things work out in that, because we'll take a look at it. Overall, as we take a look at the comps, we first off have 5Gauge over here. He's going to be running a mirror build to what Hordemus was running on the other team in the last game, and it's going to be that same build once again, running here at the moment with the rifle, along with Celestial Amulet and Runes of the Hobrecht, with the usual traits here for a Selly rifle CC build. Phantom Zeal is going to be bringing a DPS Guardian into the mix for these guys, running it once again with a Hammer, Scepter, Offhand, Focus, Berserker's Amulet, and the usual trait split now for DPS Guardian 01616. Dustin, or Magic Toker, is going to be running with that DP, once again with a Panic Strike build for his Thief over here, 60206. Nas also on Power Necro now, which again, I think that was the most interesting turn of events in the change up of their comp, is that Nas has fully committed to a Power Necro, and at least for now, has kind of given up on the Terramancer, which he had been holding on to for a very, very long time. And then last but not least being Wakey, of course, which is really where the only change-up comes in from the last team, is that we obviously have Wakey over here playing the second Celestial player, whereas previously there was only one Celestial player on the last team they played.
All right, so where on this map are we expecting to see these players? Where are we going to see Dustin? Where are we going to see Katsumi at the beginning? Where's the opening move coming from for the Abjured? Where's it coming from for Genesis?
So in a player perspective, Dustin is probably going to have a better advantage versus Katsumi here. I think Dustin, again, or Magic Toker rather, has a whole lot of experience in playing against SD Thieves. He was, you know, the top SD Thief in North America, arguably, for 3-4 months at a time, and now switching over to that, he really knows how that build works. He knows how it ticks. He himself is a little bit less experienced playing DP, but I think just on a player versus player perspective, it's going to be a little bit rough for Katsumi having to deal with that. Not only do we factor this into play, but also Magic Toker has a hard counter in play versus Zeromus, and that Magic Toker can easily take out Zeromus just in the fact that Thieves work very, very well against Mesmers. It's not so much of an advantage because usually it's SD Thieves that hard counter Mesmers, but the DP Thief still does a nice amount of DPS to him as well. And overall here, I mean, it's going to be a bit it's going to be a pretty even fight regardless of how you look at it here. Each team has a pretty decent amount spread of DPS to offer. I would say that red team has a little bit more, and blue team's going to have to play things a little bit more defensively, but at the same time, blue team does have that bit of a defensive advantage in that they have the two elementals that the Absurd used to run with for all that extra support.
So it's going to be a lot of the Absurd asking questions to Genesis, and Genesis trying to respond constantly.
Pretty much.
Unless, if Genesis gets tempo and control of this, is it going to slip away from the Absurd, or is it going to be very easy for them to just recover it?
I would say that this is a lot like the last matchup where the Absurd needs that snowball in order to make progress. If they don't have that snowball, I say that it's a little bit easier for them to get the snowball rolling or to rather keep the snowball stalemated for a little bit, but similarly to that last comp, they do need a snowball in order to make significant progress in a matchup. We saw this last Sunday, and they pretty much steamrolled Genesis last Sunday when they played against them.
Now, do you think Genesis learned from that?
I do. I actually do think they learned from that. Based on the performance from the last set, I think they did a very good job. And I don't think we're going to see that steamroll performance again this week. I think they've learned their lesson. I think that what happened last Sunday was really just the surprise of Absurd's new composition, as that was the first time we saw Absurd play that composition in a tournament. And I believe that was the first time they played against Genesis with it. So heading into today's event, I'm sure that Genesis had a little bit more time to prepare for it and overall get ready to face off against a comp like that, especially after playing the last set.
Yeah, I mean, it's been said many times before, you know, you learn so much more from losing than you do from winning. Because you find out all your weak points, you find out exactly what you need to do. But winning, Absurd don't gain as many benefits. I mean, you know, you find out that it worked.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you don't really get to learn about necessarily what you need to tweak, because, you know, a tweak could throw off such the dynamic that maybe you end up finding yourselves at a disadvantage now. Now, Absurd is so very experienced. We know their communication is excellent. Their synergy, top notch. So it's really just a situation where they, based on their experience, they're just probably going to be able to handle a lot of situations very, very well.
Yeah.
I'd really appreciate it, because I don't know them that well. If you could really just hit on when they make those incredible decisions and when you see that synergy, because it's something that's kind of hard to appreciate because it's so subtle until you're at the hull of any game.
Now, one of the things that I do want to note is the fact that Absurd does suffer from a bit of a winner, I almost want to call it a winner's syndrome, and I'm hoping that they have learned from this since what happened to WTS. But part of the reason that Absurd ended up taking second place at WTS, based on what I was seeing in that event, was that ORNG would sometimes actually get the opening advantage in a map, and 9 times out of 10 Absurd is just used to like 2-0ing every set they're used to. Like they just win every single tournament they play in, and they don't have to have a backup plan essentially, or they never really had a use for one before because they just won every single matchup. So keeping that in mind, Absurd does have a bit of an issue in that they're normally used to having just a straightforward game. So if we see the opener going into the favor of the guys over here on Genesis, that's going to be a huge gain for them, as the Absurd doesn't really normally plan for that sort of backup plan. I think that that's going to change now because of what happened at WTS, but still, it might be a factor in today's matchup.
So Kylo really would have that kind of effect, potentially?
Kylo, or?
Yeah, Kylo being number 3rd, right? Or did I mix that one up? I just did, didn't I?
No, I think you're right. It was.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say so. There's definitely a lot of chaos that can come into play there, but it's really, I think it's going to come down to these first 2 games. Are mainly going to be our deciding factors here. I don't know. It's going to be a very hard set to predict, but we're going to find out here in the opening minutes. It's probably going to be pretty apparent after we get started here. But anyway, though, folks, the game has gotten started, so let's take a look. It's the Absurd versus Genesis here at the North American ESL Go4GuildWars2 monthly finals for February. Let's take a look at the opening splits. We do have Genesis making their way pretty straightforward up to mid. Red team is going to do the same thing, but on a bit of a delay, and I actually like that they're doing this on a delay, as this does give them a bit of a secondary engagement advantage. You are going to see Wakey taking a whole lot of DPS, though, in the opening moments of this fight. Nos as well hanging back here, trying to support for these guys, trying to see if there's any damage being returned onto members of the blue team. It's going to be mainly on Zeromus and Commander Quaggan at the moment, but Commander Quaggan has already gotten out of this team fight. He's getting heals not only from himself, but from Kodo as well. But here comes Magic Toker now, putting that pressure immediately back onto Commander Quaggan, as he's going to try to get out of this team fight. It looks like he's going to be safe for now, though, and we actually will see them falling back. But now Zeromus went down. They'll get a nice heal off onto him, and he's back up into play. But almost immediately after that, we've got that pressure coming back in. He is going to be able to get that Blurred Frenzy out to survive for a couple extra seconds, but now still Zeromus taking way too much damage, and Zeromus is going to fall into the downstate pretty much completely this time, and the rest of blue team looks like they're going to get forced off of the mid node here.
Yeah, and Horde was just left behind on the high grounds. Just an easy situation for him. 5 Gauge just gets to take the point, walk away, and now they get to make a split. Even if Absurd just going to be able to 2v2 over near the henge, and then on the other side, they're going to be able to go after Commander with a 2v1. So it's just tempo, pressure, control over and over again.
And that was some good thinking there by Elrond, going over to the far point to kind of split them up here. This is going to slow down the snowball effect just a little bit because of the fact that they're not going to be able to push into that home node as effectively, and they're actually not even going to go for it here, especially considering the way that Commander Krogan is built here at the moment and how good he is at kiting. He should be able to survive long enough to where he's going to get some more teammate reinforcements. They will be able to engage in another even team fight. Red team will most obviously have the advantage going into that mid fight, but it's not sort of an all causes lost yet, just as because of the fact that they will not have Commander Krogan, but the rest of the team will be here and they will be ready to fight in this engagement.
Yeah, they were just that little bit late. A few more seconds, they could have maybe come in to help, but it looks like it's just going to become that 3v4. Oh, or they're just going to vanish into the mist.
We are going to see a portal pop, actually, as that's going to allow them to evacuate. This is going to be that very nice portal play coming out from Genesis there. They retreated to the midpoint, and again, this is those awesome portal plays that we talked about before that come out there from Genesis. And look at all the progress it's making here. Wakey has been thrown into the downstate completely there. I think they're going to be able to get him back up, but I'm not sure how they got him back up there, but they're going to get him back up from the grave, essentially, probably just by force resing him. So he's back up. We saw the Lich play coming out there from Nas too. It's taking out Commander Krogan, as well as Horde on the midpoint here. So despite Blue Team's best efforts to fall back and reinforce this midpoint, it is looking like still Red Team, they had those cooldowns preserved and ready to go for this fight, and they're still going to be able to come out on top of it.
Yeah, you're just seeing the health pools right now of Genesis drop so very low. It could get close to that 3 or 4 people going down. White from Gekatsumi Commander, they will respawn soon, but with that, you're going to lose complete control over the map. Could that go and expand into the home portal?
It very well might, as we take a look at it now. Most of Blue Team is being corralled into there. They don't really have a lot of people on the board either, so Red Team, this is going to be a nice easy push that's coming into this point now, and it looks like Blue Team's taking the bait. This is going to be a bit of a tough fight here now for the guys on Genesis. If they lose this one, that's going to be complete map control for the Absurd, and there will be many options left for Genesis. Genesis, though, did have second thoughts about pushing everyone into there. We did see Katsumi head out towards the beach, but again, this was predicted by 5Gauge, as 5Gauge was camping over there. He's going to be able to spot this one, and once again, just like Cal's into the pen, he is going to throw Katsumi over towards the henge point.
From this, what's the real answer? I mean, 171, 102, it's not completely over yet. Genesis does look like they're having a disadvantage in a lot of these fights. It looks like it's just better coordination right now out of the Absurd, but they do still have a lot of answers in their book of plays.
Yeah, it's just that this is where things start to get really rough for Genesis if the fight goes badly here. When you get wiped on your own home node, when your opponent's already controlled 2-cap, if you have no one else on the board to do anything about that, the question becomes, what do you do? Because that's essentially, that should be the safe play that you're able to pull off regardless of scenarios. Even if your opponent's control that 2-cap, you should still be able to get your home node back. So losing that really just leaves you with very few options, and it's going to put Genesis really on tilt for the rest of this set here. Now, they aren't thinking completely on that one, as they have sent one of their engines over to the far point. Not sure if he's going to be able to get this decap, but 5Gauge will actually take his time getting on notes, so he will be able to pull that one off. But again, as you take a look at the overall status of the henge fight, it's once more going into the favor of the Absurd. They're going to be able to knock out Zero Miss here. Katsumi as well will get taken down over these next few moments, and they'll have that locked down in just a second. A decap will be claimed in mid, but the Absurd's not even really worried about that. They've got a complete clear on the board away of the members of Genesis here. They're just going to take control of this boss, get an extra 25 points, as well as that little bit of a stat boost, and then now they're going to worry about handling the rest of these points. Probably will focus on getting mid back, and they either will allow them to control mine for now, or will extend back over towards that point after getting control of mid.
Now, being like water, we talked about this one a few times before with Genesis. Is that going to be an option for them today? Are they going to be able to make any kind of success with that attempt of a strategy, just avoiding and kiting out the Absurd, kind of utilizing their aggression to your advantage?
Based on the way that we've been seeing Absurd rotate, I really don't think it's going to be as easy as it was with the last team they played against, just because of the fact that Absurd's doing a lot more fluid rotationary work here. They're always there to pretty much counter out whatever Genesis attempts to do, and they've only really failed at doing so a few times. This is actually like the first example of it right here, with allowing them to take control of mine through better rotations. And actually, again, we're going to see another portal play attempt. They've got a free cap at home. We'll see if they go back into mid, but I don't think they're going to take the bait on that one. Instead, they're going to try to go for a quick rotation back over to mine, where now the red team knows for a fact that they don't have that many people defending it. Let's take a look at what's happening in that mine point, as that miss is probably going to decide who takes the 2-cap for some considerable time.
Although a little bit of damage actually going in favor of Genesis, they will be able to probably heal that one back up pretty quickly, but it's a matter of trying to find the focus, isn't it? And it's a slightly split. A few members peeling away, a little bit of a 2v1 in one section, while the rest of the members trying to group up, getting closer to the cap point, maybe trying to put the pressure on there, but it's mostly blue.
And as we see here as well, Nos is trying to put a lot of pressure back onto these blue team players back over at the mine point. Commander Quaggan is going to get taken out there once again by the Lich. Any other support coming in from the blue side is not going to want to screw around with that Lich there, so that we are not going to see anyone attempt to save Commander Quaggan. He's been knocked off. Now it's only Kodo on point trying to save and keep this decap alive for the members of Genesis, but even he and a 3 versus 1 probably won't be able to last so long, so he's going to attempt to evacuate from this. Blue team, though, has made progress on the midpoint, stealing that one away from the Absurd, and if they can knock Dustin as well as Wakey off of this point, which is looking like they're doing like a pretty good job of at the moment, they might be able to reclaim this 2-cap and keep their possible comeback rolling in their favor.
Now, are they actually finding some sort of lead? You are seeing backup finally arrive, and it's really going to even it out, but 352 to 178, this doesn't need to be things evening out for Genesis. This needs to be them actually coming back in some sort of great leap and bound, because as we near that 400 mark, the Absurd have every reason to just be able to win it, and they could even push forward, continue with their strategy, not let up, and just continue to just roll right over their opponent into the next game.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct on that one.
Yeah, so we are talking a lot about like Genesis's options, but we haven't really analyzed much of what Absurd is doing very, very well. We know they're rotating, but what else can we see? Little details that one might miss normally that are really helping with the Absurd's performance, allowing them to just kind of get ahead in all of these fights.
Just things like callouts and support is what really matters when it comes to the Absurd. It's very hard to point individual things out in these team fights because you need to be a pretty advanced individual in order to see these things, but overall you can just see it's always coming down to this big and smart rotations. They're always putting, for the most part, the correct people on the correct nodes to counter out things. Like right now, you've got Nos in mid. I mean, Nos doesn't have much of a choice being here in mid, but normally with him combined with Wakey, that was a very good combo for those two to work with. We're going to have extra support coming in a second to have both 5 gauge along with Phantom that has a nice amount of damage, as well as CC combination to try and take out, I believe it was Commander Quaggan back over that point. That would have worked very well, but again, Commander Quaggan really didn't even want to fight that, so he fell back from that one. Overall, big rotations like that and just smaller things like putting correct people on the correct points is really what matters when it comes down to a very advanced team like the Absurd.
Now, with 417 points left, Absurd's going to probably be able to close this one out. They are going to be able to take the home node of blue and control their own. They're letting mid go at this point. Is mid something that's just turning out to be too difficult to keep control of, and it's better to go for the other objectives?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's mid, but more the third cap in general. That's proving to be a little bit too risky, which is not something that you normally see an issue with on the Absurd's end of things. Normally, they don't have a problem locking down 3 cap and just controlling the entire map. So Genesis is putting enough pressure on them, and I wouldn't even say it's in fights, but more just kind of staying one step ahead of them on the rotations, or staying more like half a step ahead of them on the rotations here. They are doing enough of that to where they can actually keep enough pressure on the Absurd to force them to not push for a 3rd cap, as they are having enough trouble holding on to that 2 cap. Now, it's not enough to obviously give the members on Genesis a lead, but it is going to put the Absurd, or it is going to halt the Absurd's overall momentum by a very large margin. And if they can learn to capitalize on that just a little bit more heading into game number 2, I feel like they might have a chance to make a comeback there and push us into a game 3.
Now, if you were sitting here being a Genesis right now, and you knew you were about to lose, would you try and delay the game longer and longer so that you guys could discuss as a team more about what the most important things you guys need to go into focusing on the next one? Because it's really seems like a waste of energy to keep thinking about this one when it's such a decisive victory coming out of the gate. You need to be able to control your guys, right?
Yeah.
Sit back, think about what to do next. So Genesis can start gathering information. What do they need to be thinking about, discussing, talking about on their comms?
The rotations were good, and that's, I think, the biggest emphasis they need to take away from this first game here. Obviously, fighting against the Absurd, it's going to be a pretty daunting task overall to beat them in the first place, so I don't think that a 300 to 500 for first game is going to be a bad thing for them at all here. In fact, I think that's probably going to be a pretty good thing for them, but they need to realize the fact that, again, they were doing some very good rotational work, and they were actually ahead of them for some time on the rotational game too, in my opinion. So if they can catch on to that and now learn to capitalize on that, as I was just saying, on Legacy for map number 2, I definitely think there is a potential for them to start off ahead of the Absurd heading onto Legacy and possibly holding on to that lead too, as once again the composition over here for Genesis is just a little bit tankier than what the Absurd has at their disposal, and because of that, if we see Genesis taking that initial opener, then we will probably have them in a bit of an advantage position, and it's probably going to be a pretty big one too, assuming they're able to hold on to that 2 cap at the start of Legacy.
Really, like against a team with such kind of tempo and pressure control, they're actually going to be able to take it, keep a lead. It's not going to be a situation where they just kind of get something, but then it evens out.
Yep, the big thing when it comes again to that mid fight at Legacy, because it's that big point, is Absurd has to reach a little bit further out, essentially. They have to overextend if they want to get kills onto the members of Genesis here, and that gives Genesis some breaching room of that. If they're going to overextend, the same thing can be said as to where, okay, they're overextended now, out, we can take them out, especially because 3 out of 5 of their players are, for all intents and purposes, more squishy characters, and they can be easily eliminated. So they kind of have to, when it comes to this big mid fight, they've got to go for the bait switch. Leave someone sort of kind of at the middle of the point there, make them look appetizing, but have an option to get them back, and hopefully one of the members of Absurd actually wants to chase them back there, at which point, again, you can hopefully lock them down with an Immobilize or some other form of CC and eliminate them, giving you that little bit of an advantage in the team fight that's needed to push it over the edge and give you at least domain control of the midpoint, which can also be used to push over to a possible far node decap as well.
That sounds like a very delicate situation, though, something that requires not only your guys to set up very well, but also for your opponent to fall into the trap, to really take the bait. Now, these guys do know what they're doing, but can you really can you really avoid taking that bait? Is it going to be possible, or are Genesis going to be able to force the decision?
I think that what is essentially going to be happening here is I think that coming off of, again, another successful first game, I think Absurd is going to feel confident enough to actually want to take the bait in that regard. Or I know that probably players like Magic Toker and maybe not Nos, but players like Magic Toker and Phantom, and Phantom is actually the engager. So Phantom is, if they want to go for a team fight, Fan is the one that's got to go in on that one.
So everyone's got to be watching Phantom.
So everyone's got to be everyone's got to be keeping their eyes on Phantom, as you were just saying there. And once he is engaged in the team fight, then we will be seeing him. We will be seeing probably him be the first primary target. Now, if someone like Magic Toker also engages in this team fight and he tries to go up to a tier 3 ledging where we may have someone like, just to point an example, like someone like Horde hanging out there, if we see them try to go and take him out, or even Katsumi or Zeromus, I'm kind of forgetting these two as well, we'll probably see Magic Toker try to overextend and take Zeromus out of play before his DPS becomes a dangerous component for someone like Nos to deal with. So that's going to be the overextension that they're going to be looking out for. It'll be Magic Toker / Dustin, the thief over here on the right side. Once he crosses over to kill Zeromus, Zeromus needs to be ready to get with his teammates and then hope Dustin chases him. And at which point they can lock him down and eliminate him. That's one DPS player gone. That's a huge breath of fresh air for Genesis. And then from that point forward, it should be pretty easy sealing.
That seems like a lot to come together, though.
It is. It's a very complex thing that has to happen in this team fight. Overall, though, to put it in a much more simpler term, at the end of the day, Genesis has to play the patient game. They have to sit back, wait for the Absurd to overextend, wait for the Absurd to screw up, and at that point, really capitalize on those opportunities. They did it a couple times last game, and they did abuse those mistakes a few times, but not enough, and it happened way too late, essentially.
Do you think maybe they have that kind of intimidation factor working against them? You have the Absurd. You're going up against a team that has quite a reputation.
Yeah, I would definitely say so. I mean, it's like it's not even really like a joke, or it's not even a joke anymore. It's a pretty serious thing, in that most teams in North America just say, like, you know, Absurd's just going to win this tournament. Absurd's just going to win this tournament. It's almost like a circle jerk thing at this point in North America. So.
Well, it's pretty normal. You know, usually people will see the biggest, best team, the Absurd, carry themselves well enough. I remember seeing them in Boston. They seemed, you know, like when you go up and you meet the Absurd, you're probably going to give them the respect as anyone in the professional Guild Wars community would do. You know, you have to. You can't sit there and just go, you know, oh, it's just the Absurd. You have to realize these guys are seriously working at it. I mean, you see Phantom all day, every day. There's not a moment of your time that you can't fill with just watching him get even better at this game.
Absolutely. Phantom is a really fantastic player, and is definitely one of the tops, and easily I would have to say probably one of the top players on the Absurd. But getting back into the action, guys, as the game has now finally started, we do have quite a bit of a turn of events happening here at midpoint, with Nos under quite a large amount of pressure. He's actually gone to the downstate, but they're not executing him. I think he's in stealth there. We're just seeing a graphical glitch. They are going to use that res banner to get him back up into play, but unfortunately not a lot of follow-up on that from the blue team, as had they have killed Nos, that would have been a huge swing for them. Initially, though, we did see a pretty big turn of events happening too, as they tried to push up towards Quarry, but eventually portaled back to mid. And now, as we see this happening too, Zero is going to get stuck inside of this big ring of warding, and he's going to get taken out from the red side. Overall, before this, we weren't really seeing a lot of pressure going on the blue team, but now combining this with the fact that Katsumi was also recently eliminated, I think we are going to see the Absurd probably take the opening mid fights, and this will give them the little bit of an advantage for the start off here.
I mean, they've almost got the third even. Kodo is just lying on the ground now, and they got Katsumi's Zeromus. It looked for a moment like Genesis was going to be able to get some kind of a lead. They start off with more points at the very least, which at least is some kind of an indicator, but of course points don't mean everything, do they?
No, absolutely not. So as we take a look at what else is happening here, we are going to see the members of the red side. They're going to go for that third cap now, and this is actually fairly well warranted. They've got 2, if not 3 players really off the board right now from Genesis, so this is a pretty well warranted far push. It's going to keep Horde delayed back over there. It's going to give them a lot more breathing room at middle point, and as well, in a few moments, you're probably allow them to extend back to this point. Now, Nas is going to pop his Lich. Not really sure if this was necessary to pop the Lich, but one thing it is going to do by popping this is it is actually going to pretty much force the blue team members off the point, so they're going to get a guaranteed 3 cap now because of this.
Okay, and now we are seeing a lot of splitting, a lot more rotation out of this, of course following up on everyone's going down, but I mean, give it a moment. Once Genesis is back up, it did seem like they were trying to do something more intricate, just not quite getting the results. Could have been my misinterpretation, could have been Absurd just handling them and splitting them very, very well.
Yeah, I think you know, that's pretty right. The Absurd over here, when it comes to a far push like that, that's really what they want to do, is they just want to try to split them up and hopefully just eliminate them one by one, essentially. But get them confused, put them on tilt, as you were saying, sort of in the middle of our first match there. That's the end game goal for the Absurd, is just to put enough pressure onto their opponents to where they just don't even want to fight them anymore.
Yeah, they just, I mean, we lose the will to fight. I mean, it's even worse. It's when you aggravate an opponent, all you do is you make them fight harder. I mean, that's one reason why not to trash talk, guys.
So as we head back into some of these points to check out what's going on, Commander Quaggan is going to make an attempt to go over here towards the quarry and decap that, but 5-gauge with a very nice magnet pull is going to stop that in its tracks. Back over here at the midpoint too, where we are seeing the fight starting up to escalate, just off the point a little bit though. Horde is going to be the main player under pressure here. We've also got Wakey, Phantom, and Nas all pushing in from the Absurd back over here towards the waterfall point where blue team is trying to reclaim their home node. Zeramis is going to be able to come in here, stealth up quite a few of the members of the blue side, but again here with already 2 players out of 3 from the blue side that are within this area down, there's not going to be much that Zeramis will be able to do here, to be completely honest, and more than likely we'll just be looking at another death in the favor of the Absurd, with Zeramis going down possibly in just a couple moments.
They're just getting so much momentum. I mean, look at the Horde's been going down constantly. I mean, Kodo's barely able to stay alive. Zeramis can't walk into a fight and walk out. It's every single member of the team is just going down in a full rotation. So just you can see how Absurd is keeping the pressure on. How do they stay that step ahead? Or maybe is Genesis just not changing it up enough to really throw off the Absurd here?
I think it's mainly Genesis not changing it up enough, at least at this start here. You've already noticed too, we had that double decap going off there for a moment where they were able to actually stop a lot of the pressure coming off from the Absurd. But I mean, at the end of the day, there's just nothing being done by Genesis in response to actually trying to score kills on members of the Absurd and trying to stop that pain train from going on to them. If they continue to just kind of go YOLO on their home point in hopes of getting it back, like we were seeing there for a little bit, they're going to lose man after man after man. But, you know, if they try to adapt a little bit, like we're doing here, now that they know that most of the members of the Absurd are preoccupied in this mid-fight, now going for the waterfall point is going to be a good take because mostly everyone is, you know, already preoccupied here and they can't really come back to reinforce this waterfall fight. So this will be a nice game for them. The problem is, though, is that, again, like a lot of other matchups that we've seen in the past with Absurd facing off against North American teams, is these adjustments are happening way too late into the match, and now that's just us, with us just being over 5 minutes into the game, Absurd is already over 300 points in. With just 40 more, they do have the potential opening up for a possible Lord Rush to end the game very, very early here.
Now, those adjustments that you're talking about that are coming too late, are they the correct adjustments, just off timing? Like they're recognizing what they need to do just a little bit late? And like how many seconds is that? Is it 10 seconds that they're recognizing it too late and shifting, or is it 20?
I think
is it a minute?
The big mistake they made was trying to go for home node after the Absurd had already gotten it. Because that's, I mean, that's the strategy Absurd does every time. They get their home node, they go for mid, they wipe out mid, then they push the waterfall node. Had they have kind of waited for a full regroup inside their base and not gone for waterfall, but then came out of the base and gone for quarry, I feel like that would have worked a lot better, as Absurd always waits for the reinforcement at home node, which is a pretty predictable move by a lot of North American teams.
Now, why is it predictable for North Americans and not for Europeans?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say it's not predictable for Europeans
okay,
too. It's that I don't have enough experience in the European scene at the current time to accentuate on if that's their common choice
You were
or
being
not.
specific as opposed to pointing out a difference. Okay, I misinterpreted. Okay,
yeah,
that makes a lot of sense.
So anyway, as we check out what's going on here, once again, the Absurd is really just dominating this matchup here at the moment. Kodo is going to get eliminated by 5-gauge back over here at the midpoint. Back at Waterfall, blue team does have control of the node, but with Fantaram, Magic Toker, and Wakey all over here, they've also got a consistent amount of pressure to keep them within this point, but blue team might have enough pressure to force them back off of this node. Wakey's going to get thrown into the downstate. Fanta, as well as Magic Toker, are going to be falling back towards the midpoint, where they are going to have to fight without their shout bow, but they will still have the assistance of their CCNG, which is going to help them out a little bit. But without that support, they might be in a little bit of trouble come time when the blue team rushes into this mid-fight.
All right, with their 437 points, what's the last move Abjurd's going to have at their disposal to just clean this one out as best they can, really finish it off, put a cherry on top of it even?
Abjurd is really just going to try to turtle things out here, I think, at mid and try to get a nice clean wrap-up. They've even got their NG now falling back over towards the quarry node to make sure that nothing fishy happens back over there. And assuming things go pretty smoothly here over the next few moments, I think it's going to be safe to say at this point, guys, that the Abjurd are, for the 4th time in a row now, going to be claiming the North American ESL Go4GuildWars2 Monthly Cup, which is going to be featuring a $1,000 prize pool for them. And as for Genesis, they're not going home empty-handed. They're going to be going home with $300 for that team.
That's not bad. I think they've certainly earned it. Solid play today, really showing their ability to play just flexibly. I think like water is the only thing I can think of, just flowing around and understanding what to do. Now, maybe their reactions aren't as good as maybe Abjurd being that top-notch team, but do you think they're starting to approach that level, or are they getting there?
So map 1, we saw some really good play against them. Map 2, I don't think is really there yet. The maps and how they play are very, very different, and how you face against them. Teams have a lot of different strategies for a lot of different maps, and Abjurd I've heard differing opinions from a lot of players, but in my opinion, I think Abjurd is a pretty strong contender on this map here, especially considering just how much they lock you down if you lose that initial opener against them. So, keeping that in mind, Genesis still has a little bit of work to do in figuring out the strategy on the second map, but I do think they made some really nice progress on map number 1, at least compared to how things played off at last Sunday.
Now, of course, then I'm going to turn it into the Abjurd. The Abjurd have changed their lineup, as you've said, and you've gotten to witness this a little bit more now. What are your thoughts on the way the adjustments have been?
I think it lines up a little bit more with what the current EU meta is reflecting, or at least what a lot of EU teams such as ORNG are playing. I think that, again, after playing against ORNG, I think Abjurd have realized there's a lot of strengths in running a comp similar to that, and I'm thinking that they want to replicate that now as we start to get into the preseason for what is going to be Season 3 of WTS.
Yeah, I mean, when you get that international competition, you finally get Americans facing against Europeans. You stop being so separate. Everyone gets to play against each other, and then they get to learn from each other, and this shifts the game in ways, of course, that are a little bit hard to predict.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So with that, Genesis, good job from them. Congratulations, of course, to the Abjurd. It was a fantastic game, a real pleasure for me to watch.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun indeed. We saw some pretty good matches today. Really good set over there as well between Genesis as well as our other semifinalist team that we watched earlier today with Cade and Mime. And yeah, a lot of good matches today. Even our round of 8 match was a pretty good one. So we had
that was Radioactive versus Team Rocket?
Radioactive versus Team Rocket. Those were some pretty good games there as well. So we had a lot of good matches today. Abjurd, though, still showing that they are indeed the top North American team at the moment, with no one to contest them just as of yet.
It's absolutely great. Thank you for having me on the desk today. It was,
thanks for joining me. It was we kind of had you thrown on here, but I think you did really good, and hopefully we can have you back here next month as well, assuming I'm coming back as well.
Yeah, guys, don't forget. Feel free to leave us some feedback, of course, in the Twitch chat or to either of our Twitters. He's Dr_Blue. I'm at Ruukil. We've had a pleasure here today. I hope you guys have a fantastic evening, and we will see you next month.